Greetings. My name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller Pilates YouTube live video broadcast out to you because you're watching, and thank you for showing up. And I'm coming from Facebook as a routine daily weekday broadcast routine to you on Facebook because I'm able to reach you on Facebook, and I might not be able to reach you through Facebook, but I can on YouTube. Okay, so I have 5 titles on my broadcast that I've sort of synthesized from my notes today, and I've sort of been wearing a grin because I've come across the third request for my book, which I realized I wrote 17 years ago. So 17 years ago, I published this self-published book called Michael Miller, Elements of Pilates of the Michael Miller View, and it strikes me that it would be appropriate if I shared with you the acknowledgments, because many have influenced my thinking, but none as though my father, who inspired me to think for, and my mother, who inspired me to listen to myself, right? So anything good that ever came out of my life is because of the blessings I received by having Charlie and Elaine Miller as my parents. And I acknowledge my true love for all the joy. She knows who she is. And to all my fellow enthusiasts, which means you, you know who you are and have my deep appreciation for your influence throughout my being. And to Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, for teaching me early on in my life that the one true freedom in life is in choosing your attitude. Okay? So those are my acknowledgments to this book, and I want to attribute it to the fact that I talked about it and I told you to order it in a Kindle version because the paperbacks are few and far between, and if Amazon is looking to me for a paperback version, surely you must have hit the button 3 times. Alright, so is this merely promoting my book? No, because it's been a while since I've looked at my book. And the Elements of Pilates is meant to be a takeoff from the Elements of Style by Stroke and that other person. But the Elements of Style is a book about English. This book was meant to be about the elements of Pilates as I saw them, and then my view on a broader scale of Pilates and core new tension. But what struck me that I wanted to share with you is about fluorescence means uniform usage. That's a title. Okay, so of all of it, everything I've written, the point to my sharing this with you is that something I wrote 17 years ago is still the very same thing I'm saying today, now, to you. And it gives me a tinge of pride in that there's been a consistency in message, and that the consistency lays some groundwork, in my point of view, for there being a presence of something that has enabled me to maintain the consistency of the message. And buy the book in Kindle. But under fluorescence means uniform usage, I write 17 years ago, it takes uniform usage to get uniform development. And I've been saying that all along throughout all of these broadcasts, right? The three things in Joe's book: his promise, his definition, and his sequence. His promise is contrology produces a uniformly developed body, right? And so for me to say it takes uniform usage to get uniform development, that's been the same message for the same reasons, and over this is when the book came to print, for over 17 years. Okay? Rotational dynamic at the axes in our bodies creates endpoints of tension from which we can trigger uniform usage. Fluorescence. So fluorescence means uniform usage. And to the extent that our bodies are uniformly engaged, it makes us lighter in space. So this is the sentence that really drew me to boring you with reading something I wrote 17 years ago. Fluorescence, and I'm pretty sure I'm taking this from other authoritative sources, but I'm consolidating it down into fluorescence is the emission of energy. That means you give off energy. Fluorescence is the emission of energy resulting from and occurring only during the absorption of energy from some other source. Fluorescence is the emission of energy. You give off energy resulting from and occurring only during the absorption of energy. That means you take in energy from some other source. To the extent that this is a fluorescent tube, how does it light up? How does that work? Well, in here, there are batteries. Batteries, right? Batteries, right? Batteries. And those batteries are an energy source all their own. That's battery power. When you hook up battery power to two different places, just like you hook up rotational power at your hips and at your shoulders, you have the ability to make rotation. You have the ability at your ears to make rotation. The metaphor really extends itself because it applies. And so, when I write about fluorescence means uniform usage, whatever you get from whatever attempt you make at engaging your body to get more muscular participation, The more uniformly engaged you are, so the more uniform development you get. Right? The fact that fluorescence is emission of energy. You give off energy resulting from and only occurring during the absorption of energy from some other source. And so to me, that what that's saying to you about this image and core new tension is that when you engage in core new tension, you create a tension at the battery level power that triggers an effect in a different arena than the one in which you're creating it. Okay? Core new tension has rewards beyond, gives rewards beyond itself by helping trigger more uniform usage. And so in that regard, Michael Miller-Pilates, and talking about fluorescence, is talking about the uniform usage you seek in your body to get uniform development. Now, I haven't said this in a long time, but I think it's worth you hearing it, because you may never get the book one way or the other. If you would agree that imagination can precede movement, can you imagine movement before it happening? Okay? It doesn't have to, but if you can imagine, if you can agree that imagination can precede movement, it doesn't have to, but it can, right? Then it seems obvious that the quality of your imagination affects the quality of your movement. Yes? If you can agree that imagination can come before the movement, you can imagine movement before you make it happen sometimes. And in the imagination, if it can come before the movement, then the quality of the imagination stands to influence the quality of the movement. That's the point that this paragraph is making, right? So much in so few words. So in the next paragraph it says, the feeling is fusion, the idea is physics. So the feeling, the experience that I've talked a lot about forever in these recent broadcasts is about feeling. And in Pilates, you pursue the experience of complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit. And spirit, as defined within physics as the observer, so that you have to observe and concentrate and pay attention to what you're doing while you're doing it to get the experience that we're after. So the feeling is fusion of body, mind, and spirit. And the idea is physics because it's this physics that the biology of the human being seeks to master and implement, not even master, just implement, just engage it, however it happens, in order to survive the gravity jungle. The gravity jungle. This is the teeth of the dinosaur. And this is you running away from the dinosaur. And in this case, the teeth of the dinosaur is gravity. Pilates, I write 17 years ago, Pilates approaches conditioning by returning to fundamental movement patterns. All movement throughout the known universe evolves. What the heck does that mean? To me, I guess, Michael Miller Pilates, or my view of Pilates, approaches conditioning by returning to fundamental movement patterns. The conditioning of fundamental movement patterns, part of that, I'm thinking, is flexion and extension, side bending, rotation, and torsion. And that's because it's evident in the sequence of his mat work, and all the rest of his original work is consistent with those fundamental movement patterns. And the fact that all movement evolves. In some way I want to point out this, or let go of a balloon. If I blew up a balloon and let it go, it would spiral away. When movement shows up on the stage of reality, it expresses an expanding spiral. When movement shows up on the stage of reality, it shows an expanding spiral. I just have 3 more paragraphs. It's just this one topic of fluorescence we're talking about. Prior to this, I've said that in the introduction, I need to say this first. This book asserts that Pilates is an idea. And the idea is that what you do in the order that you do it in matters. That's the underlying idea, that what you do in the order that you do it in matters. And when I came to Pilates, I saw that the order that you do it in and how you do it matters. And in the introduction, I admit that I'm lazy and that that's the only reason I got to where I was going to. But what matters more to you now is that the idea that I'm professing is that complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit, fusion of body, mind, and spirit. So I'm using that word fusion, complete coordination of, fusion of body, mind, and spirit into a higher state of being by uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement. Have you heard that lately? Right? That's Michael Miller Pilates' definition of the ideal within Joe's work. Uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement. And I notice that the word flowing through is either missing or not there yet in my definition. But the next paragraph is that the idea is the target. The idea is the target. I'm not sure. To me now, I say the experience is the target, right? As an instructor, and my broadcast is about surviving as a Pilates instructor, in a more abstract way, to say that the idea is the target makes you reach for the abstraction of the idea, and in doing that you hit the target, I guess. So the target is to achieve, what's the target? The complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit through a few well-designed exercises done in a balanced sequence. And that expression comes, well, see, you have to know your roots. And in some way, this book is an expression of, the roots of Michael Miller Pilates. And the book starts with Pilates with 3 quotes. One from Schiller on the watercolor that Joseph Pilates had hanging in his studio. ist der Geist der sich den Körper baut. Frederick von Schiller. It's from a play he wrote. And the translation of that by the person that translated the whole play into English is, it is the soul which builds itself a body. Okay? The key thing is Geist is in there as it's a German, and there is the word Geist, and there's a lot of depth to the interpretation of what the word Geist means in any language. I took from Joe's book, Contrology is Complete Coordination of Body, Mind, and Spirit. I took from Freeman and Eisen's book, A Few Well-Designed Movements Properly Performed in a Balanced Sequence are Worth Hours of Doing Sloppy Calisthenics or Forced Conditions. That's 17 years ago. And from that, my quote I offered is fluorescence. And in fluorescence means uniform usage. There's this question I don't have an answer for you on, which seems to be on one level. I refer to this fluorescence as what we accomplish through using core nu tension between axes, and in using that tension, in creating that tension, we emanate energy in one place by absorbing energy in another. And in the sense that we're absorbing energy or we're using energy to make core nu tension, we emanate it in a special way. Perhaps a different way. I don't want to be verbose or eloquent, just that there's battery power, and then there's the energy that you can make off of the battery power. And I think we do that in our body by making oppositional endpoints of tension off of which to engage the energy in our body. Okay. And see, so there's where fluorescence is talking about muscular engagement and the physics that comes off of that. And when I talk about the target being the experience, I want to think of the experience as being more than just turning on the light, right? Because when I do Pilates and I reach for an ideal effort, that's why ideal, an ideal effort, that means I'm trying to coordinate my capacities as a human being in body, mind, and spirit. And for Michael Miller Pilates, in that brand of Pilates, spirit refers to the observer that is being written about now in quantum physics. And just that there's data on the existence of, and that there's influence from observation. And so that's the basis of the understanding and the purview of Michael Miller Pilates. Because the spirit means you have to be concentrating on what you're doing while you're doing it. And to the extent that you're reaching for core new tension in order to get uniform engagement, yeah. So the last word of that chapter is that the quality of what you do and the order that you do it in matters. Because if it isn't good quality, and if it isn't a good sequence, it can harm you rather than benefit you. So, on the one hand, all I'm trying to do is make fluorescent engagement of my muscles, of my body. But to do that, and in doing that, in making oppositional rotation between axes, you create sensation. And in creating that sensation, the feedback you get is alignment and fluorescence. So, if you're watching this broadcast, I'm encouraged because so much of what I've said, I've been saying almost exactly the same way for over 17 years. Which to me means that I'm focused on something that gives me a consistent projection of what I see. And whether it's all just in my own simulation, I'm making it up in my own mind, or if it has any connection to reality, actually, if it has any connection for you to the reality that you're in, right? I hope that my simulation of why it is what it is and what it means and what fluorescence means, and that how you're using endpoints to create tension. An endpoint is an axis of rotation. How you're using endpoints of tension to distribute load, to be lighter in space. So that's then is really my number 3 here, is that my image points to the physics that leads to a feeling. So this image of mine, no, actually, this is the Michael Miller trademark. And the Michael Miller trademark points to the physics of core new tension within the human body. So you can draw your own coils, but you can't you can't represent core new. You can't. You're better off being a licensed affiliate and having an agreement between me or my estate, because life doesn't live forever. Just have a formal agreement that you have a connection to the Michael Miller trademark, and it frees you up to use that trademark in whatever body movement you seek to teach in, right? And whether you know anything or not about Michael Miller Pilates is purely open to how well you can explain it based on what you know. And this image that I'm going on tour, I think, to just hand it out. No name, no website, no explanation, just to hand it out. Because it's only curiosity that will bring someone into wanting to understand more of what's there, and then their curiosity can discover itself on its own. Number four. It's a quote. And the quote is, "You're out of your mind." And I heard my father say that, and in response to a lot of different scenarios and situations. It's like another person I knew and respected said to me that a standard response of hers is, "I don't think so." And I don't think so. That's a wonderful response to many situations. And in some response, I heard my father say, "You're out of your mind." And it wasn't negative or demeaning. It was more an expression of, you know, whatever you're out of your mind and thinking that, I guess. You're out of your mind. It makes me wonder what we mean when we say you're out of your mind. And in the similar vein, you're dreaming. You're dreaming. You're out of your mind. Perhaps your mind then is what makes sense or is rational, and being out of your mind is being beyond what exists in your mind as rational or reasonable. So my number 5 title for today's broadcast is that you choose your attitude. You, it's tough to find it. You choose your attitude. Choose your attitude. And that's, I think, often heard enough that it's easy to understand that there's some kind of common statement about, well, you choose your attitude, right? And the point that I would add to that is that you not only choose your attitude, but you inescapably choose your attitude, because if you get up off of the ground, lying there, to whatever extent you get up off the ground, that's an expression of your attitude, and how you sit, and how you stand, and how you walk, and how you move, and all of the muscle features of your face are all an intricate expression of your attitude. And by how you hold yourself is an expression of your attitude in space. You know, your posture, how you move from one posture to the next, how you flow through space is all an attitude. And that attitude is inescapably mine for my being a human, and yours for your being a human. And that's my point, is that if the way we hold ourselves in space, let's say as a Pilates instructor and instructing Pilates, and you want to bring them to their autonomy in their own right, knowing what they're looking for and how to hit it, you have to choose an attitude toward yourself about what your role is in what you're giving them, in what you're instructing. There you go. In what you're instructing. And just recently I was watching some instruction on the low chair. And I didn't make it a title, but I want to get it in here because I may not get a chance to speak about it later. The low chair is a great lesson in what you're after in terms of triggering uniform usage because of the contact points that you make with your feet on the pedal, or your hands, or your head, but the contact points that you make on the chair between stable surfaces and unstable ones, and between spring surfaces and unspringed ones, all brings you into a consideration that there's tension between contact points, and there is tension that exists already, and there is a tension that you can install or create, tension that you create by, say, how your feet are on the pedal. And if your feet are on the pedal and your hands are over in the chair and you're in a roll-up position, 90 degrees in space, to the extent that your feet are drawing tension in toward the axis of the chair, into the circle, or out away from the circle, depending on how your body is, you're making tension from endpoints to facilitate fluorescence. And by fluorescence, I just mean uniform engagement of the body. So those are my 5 categories for today. I probably spoke way too much about, but if you're new, maybe you're new to a bunch of this. At the end of my notes, I usually have, a cornucore arrow sign, question mark, for what do I summarize this, or what do I make of this? And what I want you to take away from this is that the amazing thing, I've sold 3 books off Amazon in 4 days. And this is a long ago publication, 17 years ago. And yet it represents 99% of what I have to say now today. And what I have to add to that I don't anywhere nearly explicitly state is that the core is a grip. The core is a condition of a grip. And without a grip, there is no core. There is no powerhouse. The core is a grip, is a powerhouse. It's the condition, it's the energetic condition of the musculature that's able to make a grip at the hips. And once you by making adduction between the inner thighs, you're facilitating the depth at which you can take that grip in your whole pelvis area, right? So the consistency of the message is amazing. Maybe I've at least been talking about the same thing for a long time, and I think it's Joe's original work that I'm pointing a light at, that is offered consistency of interpretation. It's there for you too, right? And if you recognize it as that connects you directly to Joe, because you get something directly from Joe, his choreography, his definition, and which gives us what we're aiming for in the moment, and then his promise about the result, which gives us the pursuit of uniform usage to get the uniform development. And that pursuit, that promise of uniform development, contrology produces a uniformly developed body, because there's more to that sentence. But that's all I care about right there is him saying that, man, if you do this, you get a uniformly developed body. And to the extent that you understand endpoints of tension and how to make core tension between them, it sets you loose in the pursuit of uniform engagement, in the pursuit of whatever movement you're after. But within the context of Pilates, uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement. And flowing is a word that was missing from 17 years ago. And I want to add it in there. Maybe if the last few copies sell, I'll have a reason to do a second edition. But I don't see that happening, either for my ability or my time. And so the beginning and the end of this particular broadcast, in the introduction, or the acknowledgments, even before the introduction, the acknowledgments, even before anything, the acknowledgments, right? Viktor Frankl, and your attitude is your choice. And it's sometimes the only freedom that you actually have in the world is your choice. Choosing your attitude. And that was the last thing in the broadcast, choosing your attitude. And so when I go to choose my attitude, I just can't help but think of Cornu and engaging my body in a way that gives me the feedback that I have Cornu tension going on. And I just grin in a way from ear to ear that the thing that I've been driven by and impassioned by to share with you as you're watching is this. And what I'm sharing with you now, and most recently over the last few days, is still and consistently what I've been pointing to since I at least published my book 17 years ago, and it goes back almost double that if you want to get to it. It doesn't matter when you find out how to approach something that gives you good results. And all of us are the accumulation of all of the good stuff we've absorbed, and some bad, probably, in our attempt to be better at what we do. Right? Broad brushstroke comment. And if you buy the book and you get it in the flesh and it's such a disappointment, what I want you to do is at least save the cover, because you don't have to get rid of the image of Cornu that's on the cover. And you can cut off the title and the author and have it's a rare copy of Cornu where it's gold on a silver background with just black detail. All right. It's Thanksgiving tomorrow. It's thrilling to be human, and it's way beyond that to be a part of humanity. And for that, for both of those, and your part in them, I'm deeply grateful. Especially because life can't live forever. Read between the lines, see behind the curtain, add two and two, think for yourself, direct your own thinking, which is the same kind of thing, but it calls into question the director of the thinking. And with that, I end you with, of course, Geist.